Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today we have Chris Greca. He did 31 years in the United States Army, so a lot of that time in the 75th Ranger Regiment. I remember him from when I was just a little private to 21 years ago down in 175. I have a lot of respect for Chris. I know he's very outspoken on mental health and some of his journey in that, and there's no way that I'm going to do justice to a Chris Greca bio, so I'm going to hand it over to him and let him introduce himself and who he is, and we'll kick off the conversation.
Well, Yuma, to yourself and to the team, everybody who's listening out there, good morning, good evening, whenever you listen to this thing. Yeah, 31 tremendous years in the United States Army. And every time I kind of reflect and think back on my career, there were those assignments that were just huge in the development of me. And certainly one of those was the time I spent at 175, 275, but listen, I'm not going to do justice to the other organizations.
Absolutely.
I was a battalion and a brigade sergeant major out of good old Fort Polk, Louisiana, with the mighty Patriots, 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain. Did a 15-month deployment to East Baghdad in 2007 to 2009, where we lost some tremendous young American men and women that were just doing the hard lifting for the United States. Post to that, I became the JRTC in Fort Polk CSM prior to becoming the 10th Mountain Division Sergeant Major, which led to another long deployment as the RC South Regional Command South Headquarters in Afghanistan in 2010-2011. Again, tremendous assignment, tremendous organization that I had the privilege and the honor of serving with the true American heroes, and that's the young men and women that wear that. Post to that, I had the opportunity to learn about the Army at an assignment at the Combined Arms Center in Fort Leavenworth prior to becoming the Force Comm Sergeant Major, backfilling another great Ranger, my Ranger buddy Darren Bond, and then moving to United States Central Command, where the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, hired me to be the CENTCOM Sergeant Major for a little over 2 years, and that led me up to retirement. I always heard as a young Ranger, and I think this is important, young Ranger, young soldier, that when it came to retirement, Yuma, you know when it was time.
That's right.
And
yeah.
what does that mean? Well, after 30 years, 31 years, it was clearly time. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I had just hit that limit of advance where I wasn't VA or value added to the United States Army. I was NVA or no value added as a sergeant major or command sergeant major. So unlike many that kind of linger and kind of hold on, and I don't say that in a bad way, I couldn't get out of the Army fast enough. Just because I was afraid the optic was no value added. Chris Greca is still wearing the uniform. So,
I don't believe it. First of all, I know you still had tremendous value to add, and you're still doing that on the other side of the uniform.
Thank you.
But I want to ask. So you were pre 9/11. You saw the Army pre 9/11. You were there. I'm pre 9/11 by 9 months.
Yeah.
I saw a little bit of what the regiment was like then, and then the last 20 years have been a whirlwind of conflict, and now we're kind of coming back out of it again. What's your perspective from seeing it from all those angles, and what we're going into?
Well, I often say, and I use this analogy, that prior to 9/11, young men and women were not supposed to think, they were supposed to act. And I think what we saw was civilian casualties on the battlefield and other things where young Rangers and young soldiers, but predominantly because Rangers lead the way.
Right.
It started with that organization. They had to be able to think under very complex situations. Hostile act, hostile intent. How do you elevate it? How do you de-escalate it when it's required? The regiment became better. Yeah. And it wasn't about haircuts and uniforms and, colors of a beret, because I was there like and we change beret, the command comes out. And I thought to myself back then, and no disrespect intended to those listening who were kind of older school and black beret, hey, it was a headgear, man. It was, gosh, man. I mean, I never saw the reason why people got so excited
Yeah.
over it. So
I think I always reference, I'll stop you there. It's your circle of influence,
Yeah.
what you can say, change in your circle of concern. And a lot of people spend way too much time in that circle of concern. It just eats them up and they don't worry about what they influence.
Yuma, that's a great way of putting it. And that's absolutely correct. I mean, the discussion. So here I was in E8. I was on the back of an aircraft when 9/11 hit. And if you remember or recall, we were going into Hungary to do
That's right.
to do a training operation. And Sergeant Major Greenway was laying next to me, and the good Dr. Proctor, our company commander, and the pilot came back, or the co-pilot came back flying the aircraft, and again on the back of a C-130, and said, hey, the World Trade Centers have been hit, the Pentagon's been hit, and there's 17 hijacked aircraft in and around U.S. airspace. And I thought to myself, change of mission. Because to me, it wasn't real. It was just a training inject where we were going to show the flexibility and the agility. It wasn't like any of us woke up from that plane trip. And by the way, Andy Fernandez, I believe, was on the back of the aircraft with us, I believe. But regardless, it was just, okay, this ain't real. And it took us hours to figure out. They diverted our aircraft. We landed in Bosnia, tax-free money, as we called it at the time. We were all excited. But we just didn't realize it was real, because who would be bold and brave enough to do an attack on our homeland? Turns out, unfortunately, it was real. In the last 20 years, the hard hitting and the heavy digging that the Ranger Regiment has been doing makes you proud. Makes you proud to be one time associated with an organization like that, and to see just their capabilities.
Yeah, so we have two different perspectives here. I was a private when that happened.
Yep.
You're a senior leader in the organization. So I remember when it happened, I was in my barracks room, the old barracks at 175 and the old starships there. And it happened and everything was going really fast. And they said, I was getting bags ready and they said, what are you doing? You got to go to the range and guard the ammo. So I went out and pulled guard for a week. So I had a different perspective as a senior guy. Did it just feel different when you knew it was real? You knew something was coming?
Yeah. I mean, well, when it first came out, kind of the emphasis was, so 375 had jumped in, did Operation Rhino, I think, on that airfield. Once the 175 gets the call, but as you recall, it wasn't a battalion. Our first one was not a battalion deployment.
Right.
And General Retired Tony Thomas, our battalion commander at the time, was fighting, saying, hey, give me the battalion inside this theater of operation. But instead, it was Alpha Company Plus, and I was part of the Plus. I was the Ops Sergeant Major at the time. So listen, there was a lot of disgruntled people. Whether it was Bravo Company or Charlie Company, because the thought was, all right, we've been doing all this training, now we want to get involved, and we're going to get left out, because none of us thought that damn thing was going to last longer than 6 months to a year. And here we are 20 years later, and all those that thought, hey, I'm going to miss out, I'm not going to get stereo scrolls, is what we called them on both sleeves. And the opportunity to serve during combat operations, well, nobody's been left out.
That's right.
In the regiment, I mean, so.
And in some cases, we got more than we could bargain for.
Certainly,
more than we thought.
Certainly, the losses, they make you realize that, hey, listen, war and conflict are real. And starting with us, 375 had a chopper, I think, landed and killed a couple of those Rangers.
Stonecipher and Evans.
There you go. I knew one was Stonecipher, did not recall the other Ranger's name, but God rest in peace. And then with us, with Takagar and Bradley Krause, Mark Anderson, and Commons. Okay, wow, now it becomes real. I was just sitting with Krause a week prior. I was in Afghanistan. The sergeant major list comes out and they tell Ken Turner I was the only one who had first sergeant time outside in the joint security area over in Korea. And Doug Greenway, I was supposed to get Bravo Company and backfill Big John Van Cleve. And And they came out and said, no, you're going to get headquarters company. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah.
That is not what I waited, and no disrespect intended to those great men serving in the headquarters companies with your 1 through 6 and your snipers or recce and mortars. But I'll tell you what, I was disappointed. So anyway, I flew back. Don't ask me how I got back to the States, because to this day, I don't know how the hell I did it. I literally was on an airfield with my thumb pointing out, trying to hitch a ride. So I get back to Savannah, and our XO at the time, I have no idea about Takagar. I've seen no TV. I've just been traveling. So I go into work, and Dan Walrath, our XO, looks at me and says, hey, you got your Class A's together? And I was like, well, I don't have my shoulder sleeve insignia. It still has Master Sergeant, and hell, I didn't think we were going to do this ceremony thingy for a few days. And he's like, no, I need you to go notify a family down in Jacksonville, Florida. And by the way, there's 3, because Mark Anderson's parents were split up, so it was mother and father. And then I had, they were together, but the Krause family, Sheila had remarried, and then Brad's father, so it had to be a simultaneous kind of coordinated hit where we all notified at the same time. We were afraid or the Army was afraid, if we notified one family that they would start talking.
And we've seen that in the past, in the years to come.
Absolutely. So me, John Van Cleve, and I think Rick Merritt was the third. We lined up outside doors. I think Rick had the Anderson family, if I recall correctly, and John had Father Krause, although I might have this somewhat screwed up. But regardless, 3 of us notified at the same time. And Yuma, to this day, militarily, the hardest thing that I've ever done.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, you can't, when you're over there and you're in it, you don't realize everything that has to go on the backside. It's harder to deliver that news. And when I came back and I met, Matt's mom for the first time, and that was hard, reliving that all again. And, I'm still really close with them, but that's a whole nother side of it. That's a whole nother side of the conflict that we don't see.
Well, I failed at it. They gave us, because our chaplain was deployed, we all got these rent-a-chaplains from Third ID that they gave us to go notify. And, on the way down, I'm like thinking in my mind, I really don't need this gentleman. I'm glad he's here, but I've got it. And we were supposed to, on behalf of the Secretary of the Army, I regret to inform you that your son, whatever. Yuma, those words never came out of my mouth.
Oh, wow.
I never said I got in there. When I finally saw her, she started tearing up, Sheila. I did too, and nothing came out of my mouth. And it was just the most awful thing, looking at a mother and just realizing how horrible it was. And if I could back up just real quick. So when I knocked on the door, Sheila was sleeping or was in bed, and the stepfather answers the door. And I said, can I speak to Sheila? Well, she's in bed. Sir, I really need to do this. He's gracious enough to let me in. So we're standing in the living room, and they've got, I think it's Fox News, but one of the news agencies, and it's showing the fight. It's showing the CH-47 from the infrared thing, little SEAL falling off the back, Neil Roberts. And I'm thinking to myself, they've been watching their son die. They just don't know it. And above the fireplace, or not the fireplace, but the TV stand, was a picture of Brad.
Oh, wow.
So I'm looking at Brad. I'm looking at this now on mute. Stepfather's fidgety. He's putting cushions on the couch in place. Sir, no need to do that. And I could hear him in the back bedroom. Sheila, you need to get up. There's somebody here to see you. So I'm getting a little antsy thinking about it, my gosh, and just the totality of what was going on. And I failed, man.
Oh, man. That's, and I'm sure you've relived that 1,000 times.
Oh, I have. Yeah. And she's been gracious enough. She attended my retirement, and she attended my change when I came out of the CENTCOM AOR, because that kind of event gave me more purpose. It made us more purpose-driven in regards to what we do isn't a game with blank adapters on the front of the weapons and wearing Miles gear. It's real.
This is real. And I think that's a great point, because to transition to the topic of vulnerability, because you're
Yeah.
pretty vulnerable at that moment, having to
Absolutely.
talk to Sheila. And I just wonder, in all your career and post career, what does that word vulnerability mean to you?
Well, vulnerability and transparency, and something that we were talking off air, are one and the same. Listen, and something I've learned through years of counseling is, listen, events like that are going to affect you.
Yeah.
And if they don't affect you, you've probably got some issues. Now, it could affect you positively or negatively. And I think admitting that you are vulnerable or to these events and how they've affected you, it's my belief that it'll make you stronger, and it makes others reach out. I almost think that you're a hypocrite if you're a leader somewhat and you're dealing with difficult times and challenges, which many in uniform deal with. Listen, it takes a community to help that veteran out, and that's starting with the family, but friends and others, to say it's okay, man. It's not a normal human thing to watch other people die, whether it's friend or foe, or wounded to such an extent that it's forever changed that individual's lives.
Absolutely.
And sometimes vulnerability is the things that you can't see. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, I look at Yuma and I go, man, the guy's got it all put together. But, underneath that physique and that shell, what's really going on?
Yeah, it takes it. We got to have the courage as men and leaders to ask the question, the deeper question, to get to it, to have those meaningful conversations, because I think that's what can change somebody's life.
Absolutely.
If you show that you really care about something below the surface in there. And in that, how many kids do you have?
I have 3.
So 3 kids, 31 years in the Army. How did you do that? How does that balance? How does that work?
Not well.
Lessons learned there?
Not well for me. I'm a much better grandparent and a much more present grandparent than I was a father.
Right.
So you kind of learn. I used to circulate, as I would circulate around those countries, be it Iraq or Afghanistan, I would see young men and women that were 18, 19, and 20 years old. And I used to have this conversation that, no disrespect intended towards my own kids, but if you still live under the roof with mom and dad, maybe you're still a boy or a girl, and you haven't kind of made that transition to being a young adult. Back when I was 18, 19, 20, a year was forever. I mean, think about that.
Absolutely.
Think about your senior year of high school, to put it in perspective. And at the time, you were so to ask young men and women to put on a uniform and go deploy for even 90 days, 100 days, that's a long time. 6 months, 9 months, a year, 15 months. That's forever to some of these kids.
It really is,
Whereas to me, I was older at the time, and it was like, hey, it's only 15 months.
Right.
We'll be back in 455 days, man.
Right.
See you later. So to your question, I was largely absent. And I could have done a better job.
Yeah.
So as I reflect, I absolutely acknowledge why this grandparent thing works out so well.
Yeah.
Because people have the ability as we get older to appreciate and better understand our actions and behaviors, and how that affects in the conversations, and how that affects the younger folks. So I'm trying with my own kids. It's still a work in progress, but hey, I'd give me an A+ on that grandparent thing.
Well, it's what you said. It's a work. As long as you keep working at it and trying to cultivate it and do the best you can, I think that's all you can do, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I had one of those moments too when I saw you and Darren and who else was
Del
on
Byers.
Byers up on that retirement stage. I was like, I want to kind of do what they did. And then I had one of those moments with my own son who said, I'm done. I'm tired of you deploying. I'm tired of moving, and I changed everything. I changed my priorities. So,
well, Yuma, if I could, hey, listen, positions like that are accidental in nature, and what it comes down to is, so some people, called it star chasing or whatever. That is so not accurate. The accuracy of it is, you get an opportunity to serve at a higher level. And what you think is, in your mind, or at least my belief was, I can affect change.
Oh, yeah.
The higher up I get, all the stupid stuff that people do in the United States Army, well, guess what? I get to be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. I sat on the board of directors with the Sergeant Major of the Army, and we would do a bunch of stuff. So every quarter we would meet, and it was like us 3- and 4-star level dudes, predominantly 4-star level guys and gals. And we would make recommendations to the Chief of Staff of the Army and things like tattoos. I'm sleeved, right? The Army was going down a bad path of, hey, take pictures, measure it, no bigger than the palm of your hand. And I was like, boy, that's jackassery, man, especially to a younger population.
Yep.
We need to remember that we are old. We try to not admit it and think we're making decisions, but as society changes, so too does the men and women that make up our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And you got to change with the times, and if not, you become that stagnant stuff on top of a pond, the moss, because it's not living and breathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a great regimental sergeant major tell me that from the 75th. I asked him why he got out after the 75th assignment when he was clearly on to other things like a division or whatever. And he said, Chris, I had become the stagnant stuff on top of a pond.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, as regiment was changing, I couldn't change with regiment. So I just knew, hey, it's time to retire. And I said, wow, the
self-awareness. Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The ability to see yourself accurately. I'll tell you, I was blown away by that statement.
Yeah.
And by the way, a Ranger Hall of Fame member too. So just one of those guys that you're like, boy, he got it.
Yeah, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame, because he's self-aware and he understood his place, and that's amazing. So back to the uniforms. So all those years, what was your hardest day? Was it that time standing in Croce's living room, or did you have?
Oh, absolutely. Because it defined me. And again, it was not drastic change, but it was very gradual in the sense of how you change and how those events change you. So as I got back into, the theaters of operation, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, I did 2 more deployments with the regiment, one into Afghanistan and then one into Iraq. And then I became a sergeant major and did my sergeant major time away from the regiment. But that event kind of defined me. I used to watch people grieve at memorials inside the theaters of operation. And to be quite frank with you, Human, I'm embarrassed to say this, I didn't get it at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I would sit there and say, either A, they're putting on a show, they're kneeling and doing all that, they make the sign of the cross thingy. But I would sit there and just think to myself, how can you be a leader? The profession of arms, which me and you both signed up for, and the Ranger Creed, which we both signed up for, in and out of the regiment, you're still living that creed, right? And as you lose people, you just understand part of conflict is death.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to marginalize it, man, but I got to the point where I didn't feel. And I knew I was having problems. My father passed in 2011 when I was over in Afghanistan. And I come back, and I think he's going to already be deceased. ALS got him at a fairly young age. And so we knew he was going to die. This wasn't a surprise. But I got back home, and I felt nothing. And here's my role model, and I'm looking at him in the casket, and I'm thinking, I think I'm supposed to be crying. But all I could think in my mind was, all right, he's 65. Most of the people we're losing in conflict, let's call them 20.
Yeah.
What would have they given for another 45 years? They would have given anything.
Absolutely.
So, I called it perspective at the time, and this is a rational way of thinking. Dude, it wasn't rational. All right. When you lose your father or your mother or loved ones that are close to you, you're supposed to feel something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Instead of trying to fake it, I think I was trying to fake tears in the memorial or the ceremony. But I was so worried about getting back to Afghanistan. That's all I could think of. I'd already taken block leave, so I'd wash that thing away. And I'm thinking, I'm not supposed to be out of theater. That's what I'm thinking inside
wow,
my mind is, why am I even here?
Oh, that's amazing. So that's a good way to go into the mental health side of it. And you're a big advocate for
Huge.
mental health and its
Huge.
benefits and understanding yourself and self-awareness. And from that, where you were in that moment to where you are now, how is that your journey in mental health helped you out?
Yeah, it's steps. I mean, it's not an overnight process. So I use the VA, and I have been very, very blessed with the psychologist and psychiatrist, predominantly psychologist, through the VA. And right now I'm going through some of that in-depth, one of their processes or programs to understand myself better. And it truly does you. I mean, listen, I walk out of those things going, wow. Like last week we came to the conclusion that I am a master avoider. I have the ability to avoid and deflect conversations that are uncomfortable to me. And I don't do it intentionally. Unintentionally, I just do it. So I've been blessed. Certainly, you know about the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program. But it started with, I don't know if you know Sarah McNary.
I don't.
So she was part of the Care Coalition over in Landstuhl. She was a TBI nurse. And when I was the CENTCOM Sergeant Major, my guy that I traveled with was a Sergeant First Class everywhere I went, because we would travel commercial aircraft. And I needed a ranger buddy or a wingman, right? So Adam York got a little bit sick, and I end up in Landstuhl. By P.S., I was born there, but I had never been there, so it was kind of cool looking at the hospital and taking selfies, sending my mom going, hey, the hospital, they haven't rebuilt it. But Sarah had the opportunity to sit down, and she goes, you mind if we just have a conversation? I'm like, no. And so we started talking, and she's like, dude, you have problems. And I'm like, Sarah, what are you talking about? I feel like $1 million. I'm fit. And she goes, no, you're not. You might be physically fit, but you ain't even that. I mean, if you're over medicating in terms of, sleeping medication predominantly, you're not okay. And so she kind of brought that awareness to me. So here's a U.S. SOCOM asset through the Care Coalition and POTIF, that, part of that process and program. And she's the first one that says, dude, you are screwed up. And by the way, when you get back to MacDill, U.S. CENTCOM doesn't have a psychologist, or, they leave that to the service component commands, Army Central, Marine Central, Special Operations Central, so on and so forth. But I link up with the deputy psychologist for U.S. SOCOM, and he became a lifesaver. I'm utterly convinced he saved my life through awareness.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Well, I mean, absolutely powerful. And Sarah, God bless her, she's back in the States now. But what she was doing, and by the way, she did it for, not to bring up others, but some other senior leaders as well. And it's just, without that awareness, you can't be transparent. And you can't be vulnerable.
So I see it from one perspective, because I'm still in uniform, and through everything we've done the last 20 years, I think the stigma is starting to go away with trying to get some mental health, and it's starting to look like you go see the guy at the gym that helps you get a bigger bench press. Why wouldn't you go see the person that's going to help your brain? On the other side, with the guys that are retired, is the stigma starting to go away there as well, you think?
Gosh, man, I hope I'm right when I say this, but man, I think the stigma's been gone for a while. But the problem is, I'm saying that through the lens of an old guy who sat around with a bunch of old people that says, hey, it no longer exists. But what's happening at the squad and platoon or the team, squad, platoon, and even company level, younger folks don't think like we do all the time. So I'm not sure that, not in my squad, it doesn't, or this is my squad, both the last two SMAs kind of programs, I'm not sure it doesn't still exist.
I think it does a little bit, and it's about perspective and reframing it, and if they can start to understand themselves a little bit and make it about themselves, because this generation, they are about themselves, instant gratification and feedback. it seems to help in that. Then they go ask somebody else for help or guidance. So
yeah, I hope so. But sometimes we say, hey, listen, like in the United States Army, you can, you don't have to worry about the repercussions of asking for help. There are absolutely none, right? We'll get you the help that you need. But then, like when I was on the BOD or recently, I had a young lady who went to mental health and she got picked up for a drill sergeant assignment, and she was so happy about this young sergeant. And then she gets pulled off because she's going to a position of trust, and apparently this mental health, you can't go be a drill sergeant if you've seen a mental health worker. Now, let's think about this, Yuma. You can lead America's sons and daughters in combat and conflict, yet you're not good enough to be a drill sergeant.
it seems a little backwards.
Oh, way backwards. way backwards.
Yeah.
Why doesn't a waiver exist at the 05 or 06 level with a commander that says, hey, I got it. Yuma went and sought help. But man, what a tremendous drill sergeant that guy would be in front of shaping the character of these young men and women. So,
I agree.
Backwards.
Yeah. Get some water there. We're going. And then so what was your transition like from service, and what advice would you give those or specifically retiring? Like, what are the things that you learned, your lessons learned, you need to pass on? Because we're coming up on kind of a phase where there's a lot of my peer group that are in that now.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're in it from 20 years to 35 years, right? You got to make the decision at the right time and place, and it's, in many cases, I think you need to choose between three things. One is location, what's right for your family. The second is it about the financial incentives? In other words, are you relocatable based on what you're going to get paid and the ability to support yourself and the family? And then finally, doing what makes you happy. So that retirement ceremony that you alluded to a little bit early, myself, Darren Bond, Del Byers, great friends, mentors, peers that we had. But since we have retired, almost 4 years ago, Del Byers has not worked a day in his life. And prior to retirement, he would tell you, I'm not going to work a day in my life. I'm going to go sit in a deer stand, or I'm going to go fishing. And that's what Del Byers, because financially he set himself up. Darren wanted something with a little bit more stability and went and worked. He works on post at the CDID, Building 6 right next door. So the capabilities development and an integration, so he's working systems. And then myself, I got out and started my own business, right? Yeah. And certainly I do a little bit of consulting work for others and do some other things, but why? Because all three of us did what makes us happy.
Absolutely.
So when you retire, hey man, now's an opportunity after giving. And by the way, selfless is what we all did in uniform. It's okay, in my opinion, to be a little bit selfish when you retire.
Yeah. You can still be a quiet professional, but be proud of where you came from, be proud of what you've done, and tell people about it in a respectful way.
Yeah, absolutely. Be a role model, because that's ultimately, when it's all said and done, our impact is in the people, right? It's not in systems. It's not in. Darren Bond has a great bench named after him at 175 in the little 175 memorial area. But it's, Darren would tell you, I would tell you, Del would tell you, Frank Grippy would tell you, Ralph Borja would tell you, and I could go on and on and on with this list of senior leaders, Hugh Roberts, that ultimately it's about the people. I am so proud of Craig Bishop. Back when we were in 175, I said to myself, Craig, and I was having this conversation with Doug Greenway, and I said, that's the best squad leader and probably platoon sergeant given the opportunity in 175's Craig Bishop. Well, look at him. He was the 1st Infantry Division CSM, currently serves up in the Fort Bragg area. Wow. And then I remember young Brett Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think he was a specialist and maybe a sergeant at the time when I first met him. And he's going to be the next regimental sergeant major. Yeah. So it validates these thoughts of, these young men and women. My gosh, they've gravitated, and they're extremely successful. And then you become a little bit proud of that, right?
Absolutely.
So you look back and go,
Yeah. Yeah, I have some similar, just some, guys that worked for me in the past, either in platoon or as a squad, and I look at them now and they're platoon sergeants or they're first sergeants now, or one of them's even an ops sergeant major now. It's just, it validates kind of what you did, and it's an amazing thing to see that. And if you could go back, everything and you could get a hold of Private Greca, what would you tell him to do different or the same, or how would you set him up for success for that 31 years that you followed?
Listen, I was blessed over that 31 years, Doom, and I'm telling you, I could go assignment to assignment and just kind of go, man, I mean, whether it was being a drill sergeant and impacting, whether it was being a drill sergeant leader. So I was an instructor at the drill sergeant school, and Fort Benning had one back in the mid-'90s, and just the impact with other non-commissioned officers. But I always said to myself throughout my career, don't ever be a hypocrite. And I think for the most part, I was fairly good at that. Listen, when I was in 275, I got kicked out. All right. I did some things that a young ranger wasn't supposed to do, like John Van Cleve, same story. So I went outside, did my time in Big Army, and I went back to 275 because I ultimately made a mistake. One of the most powerful conversations I ever had when making this mistake was with LG, right? Ranger legend, probably the best sergeant major, if you were to do a poll, LG was the soldier's sergeant major. I mean, this was just a guy. So I was appealing this Article 15 I was getting, and I just didn't think it was right? People were lying about the circumstances, and I was blaming others for my action, right? And so I'm up at 275, and I'm walking in the quad, and I swear to you, from a couple hundred yards, I hear, Ranger Greca. And I go running. Oh my gosh, man, the sergeant major actually knows my name. And I'm double timing over, and he's sitting on the Ranger rock. And he says, Ranger buddy, he goes, I heard you want to appeal your Article 15. It was happening at the company level, so the appealing officer would have been the battalion commander. And I was like, well, yes, Sergeant Major, I do, because they're lying. And he said, Ranger buddy, think about this. He goes, the difference between being a man and a young boy is being a young boy or a young woman, they deflect blame, like a high school kid, right? Yep. It's other people caused me to do this. He said, being a young man, you accept responsibility for your actions and learn and grow. Yuma, I felt 2 inches tall during this conversation, and I did, because frankly, I knew what I did was wrong, but I wasn't told I couldn't do it. And that was the premise in which I was going to get in trouble was, hey, this was put out, you didn't listen, therefore you and these other folks are getting, punted for a little while. Man, when he said that, accepting responsibility makes you a man, I was like, wow. Yeah. Wow. I feel this tall sergeant major. I don't want to appeal it anymore. My goodness. I mean, so it was just powerful. Absolutely. And I hope me and you, have imparted things like that and just tidbits where young folks kind of go, you know what, I once had a conversation with Yuma or Chris, and this is what they said, and it impacted me. Yeah. So I tried to be that when I was in uniform, that leader who would listen and just help people mature. Absolutely. If you believe that you've got a perfect product after basic training in AIT, that young man or woman who lives the Army values and RASP, that lives the Ranger Creed, you're wrong. What they've done is they've memorized the Ranger Creed, and they've certainly memorized the Army values, but it takes years for that to be inculcated. And bits and pieces, maybe the 4 stanzas of the Ranger Creed. Gallantly will I show the world that I'm a specially selected and well-trained soldier. My courtesy to superior officers, neatness, dress, and care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow. So maybe that hits you first. Right, yep. Maybe. And at different points, I'll never forget, you were in 175 when we did Operation Restore Freedom, which was the Jessica Lynch mission. Oh, yeah. That was the name of the operation. Yep. So if you go to our stanza of the Ranger Creed, that you shall never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy, and under no circumstances will I embarrass my country. Okay, wow,
Yeah.
I've got it.
Yeah.
I've got it. And
Yeah.
granted, she wasn't a Ranger buddy,
Yeah.
but she was still a woman in uniform.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No different in my eyes.
No different in my eyes either, man.
And yeah, I think you're right. It's the job of the leaders to cultivate those younger leaders coming up
absolutely.
and continue to do
What
it.
company were you in at the time? by the
Alpha
way?
Company.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you were with Darren Bond and then Rob
Yep.
Arndt?
Yep.
And then my good buddy Rob, took ACO after the fact.
Yep, absolutely. I remember
Wow.
that whole crew down there. And then now that you're out, 31 years later, you're retired. I know you do some stuff for beaverfit. You have your own consulting business, I think, with the Fifth Principle. I'd like
I
to
do.
know a little more about it. And the story you told me about beaverfit, I think it'd be interesting to everybody because I just see them all over the post and all over the globe, frankly.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the origins behind it.
Yeah, the origins is not to disappoint everybody that's out there. So beavers do not work out, and in fact, but beaverfit is the name of a family, and that's the Beaver family from the UK who started beaverfit to support the London Olympics. They mobilized their security forces or folks in uniform. They didn't have anywhere to work out, and the Beaver family went to welding and kind of made the baseline product of the gym in a box. So again, not to disappoint everybody who's listening, but it's not an animal, although our logo is the two front teeth of a beaver.
Right.
And that was made by one of our owners, Mike Taylor, excuse me. He's an Annapolis grad. The other co-owner, Alex Roodhouse. Alex is not a West Point. He's a Notre Dame grad. And they partnered up with the Beaver family to start beaverfit North America. So that's the origins of beaverfit. I joined them 4 years ago, just as I was retiring, because I believe in the solution. We were always told while in uniform, the big four wins the day, which was PT, marksmanship, first aid, and battle drills.
Yep.
And it's something that I wish we had when we initially
Absolutely.
deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Instead of me working out with Craig Bishop and all these other using this Barney Rubble gym.
Yeah, I remember the gym in the basement down
that's
there
right.
in Bodrum.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The gym in a basement, man. So getting it on with whatever. By the way, it was also our ammo holding area.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So great place to work out, man. If anything happens, you're just going to probably blow yourself up, man. So,
Yeah, that's right.
that's beaverfit. Fifth principle. Predominantly character coaching. So I recently finished my master's degree through Norwich University, and I got it in organizational leadership.
Yeah.
And it just aligns with everything that I did in uniform. But I am absolutely fixated on this idea of character coaching.
Oh,
And
yeah.
how do you...
Hiring on character.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And how do you get it to resonate? Because to me, I would rather have a young man or a young woman with character and that do not have competence, because I can build that competence or capability, right?
Yeah.
But if they're bankrupt when it comes to their character or their values,
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah,
Good luck.
absolutely.
Now, certainly it can be changed, but we know from the military it takes hard work to
Yeah,
do
and
that.
how many people know what the fifth principle comes behind? Because is it coming
So-
from behind common sense, right?
It is
Yeah,
common
okay.
sense. So when I start, absolutely. So it is absolutely the fifth principle of patrolling.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, it was embedded into our minds when I was a young Ranger in 275 back in the late 80s that planning, reconnaissance, security, control, and common sense. And that fifth principle of common sense kind of driving the way organizations lead themselves. So at Fifth Principle, we're predominantly a group of retired senior NCOs, although we do have officers. I mean, this is not just isolated.
Right.
But we want to share what we learned from 20, 25, 30 years in uniform and give back to not just those in uniform, but to the civilian community. Listen, the regiment, the Army, but more particularly the Ranger Regiment, is a leadership factory.
I agree.
Ultimately, when it's all said and done, what you have just done, there was a time when I was the Force Comm Sergeant Major when the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odierno, turned around and he said, I look at the NCOs that were affected by the Ranger Regiment. And inside the room was Ranger Rick Merritt. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay, there you go. Enough said. But it was DB, Darren Bond, myself, Del Byers, and numerous others. And Tim Dotson, I think, was in the room when he was the 7th IT.
Oh,
but
yeah.
his point was, look at this. And last week, coincidentally, I had a conversation with the current 101st Division commander, who's a great friend, J.P. McGee, and he was talking about the officers that were groomed. And I can remember back to my 275 days, these young platoon leaders or young captains like Charlie Flynn, who's about to pin his 4-star and become the commander of USERPAC. I mean, it just, you look at it, officers and NCOs, if you see that scroll on the right shoulder, it's probably something special. Finally, I'll tell you, and as part of this, that listen, it doesn't make you great just to have served in the regiment.
Right, yeah.
Like any other thing, the right person who served in regiment is going to take away their takeaways from that experience. Training, education, and experience define us all. Everything we do in life, training, education, and experience. And it happens over 3 domains, like serving in the operational force institutionally, and then self-development, going to college on your own, going to the gym after hours. That's how everybody, not just in the Army, but in the world, is developed. Training, education, and experiences, which are jobs and everything else. Those experiences allowed us to give back, to go into the Army and say, this is kind of stupid, or might be stupid. Maybe the fleece is a jacket instead of an undergarment meant to be worn over. It's a fleece jacket, for Christ's sakes. Wear it like a jacket. But it was just silly little things that you said, man, one day maybe I will get the opportunity to change that. So
and I really, when I first saw the fifth principle, I think it was probably through your LinkedIn. I saw it on there. It resonated immediately with me because that's what, as a leader, squad leader and above, anytime a team leader, anybody would come with me, I'd always ask, did you apply the 5th principle first?
Absolutely.
That's my first. If you did that, I'm going to trust you, right? I trust you. And they knew where I came from and my expectations were. But Chris, it was amazing having you on here. You're still a wealth of knowledge and expertise and a great storyteller, and I appreciate it. And I know you're right up the road. We'll have to do some more of this in the
Yuma,
future.
by the way, absolutely in any time. I mean, we're here, we've briefed you before. I do a lot of work. I sit on a board.
Oh, yeah.
And by the
Great.
way, I do not get paid for the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program, but just to let everybody know, the former Surgeon General Naja West, she is a board member.
Right.
The last SEAC, John Wayne Troxel, is a board member. Anthony Spadaro, a Marine, and by the way, the smartest Marine intellectually and from a leadership perspective, he's on this board. But regardless, listen, this is a free program.
Yep.
2 weeks in duration. They pay all airfare. They put you up in a hotel. They pay you per diem to go through this program. I would encourage everybody who's watching or listening to think about this and to think about not just your Ranger buddies, but in the big Army, their battle buddies or their teammates that they have. If somebody's struggling, and it could be sexual assault, some type of trauma that has existed, go out there and get help.
Yes.
I did my help through the National Intrepid Center of Excellence in NICO, kind of going up there for an inpatient program. But had I known that Emory existed, because the results speak for themselves, and that's over a 90%, or it's a 96%, I believe, satisfaction rate. But more importantly, their levels where they drop back off are so substantially less than other programs. Again, the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program, to those that are listening, and I would encourage all, even if you're out of uniform, it applies to veterans, regardless of your discharge status, because in many cases, and I'm not sure I necessarily agreed with this, but in many cases, that discharge status was based off some trauma or other events that have taken place. But listen, is that one commercial that's free. There's a commercial out there like that. And that's what the Emory Healthcare Program is. And I promise you, we recently got a note from a spouse, a handwritten note from a spouse, thanking us for the impact, or
That's
them
amazing.
for the impact. Yeah, she said it saved our marriage.
Oh, wow.
It saved, because ultimately we know that relationships, there are some factors in this 22 a day, and that's
Yeah.
relationship issues, professional issues, getting fired, lack of income, and during these COVID times or these pandemic times, man, it's just harder and harder and harder, right? But it's a place that you can reach out and ask for help, and trust me, there's going to be somebody on the other end of the phone that's going to bring you up there and make you better.
Absolutely. And it takes a little vulnerability, a little courage, and it takes each other to do it. It's got to.
I love personal courage, Yuma.
Yeah.
I just think it's something in that personal courage isn't the physical courage. It's the moral courage. It's the mental courage to kind of step forward and raise your hand a little bit and say, I need help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, I needed help. I thought I had a heart attack at my house. It turned out to be a exhaustion or a panic attack. I was like, no way. You got to be panicked in order to have a panic attack. I'm never panicked.
That's not me.
Right? I'm like, you talk to the room over, the guy over. You're talking to the wrong guy, because I don't have exhaustion or panic attacks. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong, dude, and thought I was going to die. I mean, Pat McCauley was watching my kid as I was going to the hospital, and it's scary. If you think you're going to die when you're in the United States of America, it's one thing to be deployed, and I've been in situations where the convoy I was in got blown up, and we lost 6 in the vehicle right in front of me, and it was our PDSS when I was the 10th month. We lost our G1, Colonel Belkifer and Colonel Bartz, Colonel McHugh from CAC, Jeff Parker. And what I will tell people is that all those events, I was like, never panicked. I was like, whatever. But when you think you're going to die in your living room,
that's a different story.
Oh my gosh, man. That's scary. So, Yuma, thanks. I hope to do this again. I know I can be long-winded at times, but being around you, man, and just your passion and compassion and talking about vulnerability and what it is and the transparency that we need in leaders to just kind of step forward and tell their stories, because I think it's going to resonate with the younger population, especially with the CARE Coalition and people that you're wrapped into that have never stopped.
Right.
For 20 years, they have never stopped.
Right.
So, wow, man, that's a long time, dude.
It is.
That's a career.
It is. That's a full career. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And for all those out there listening, I know you enjoyed today. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.